us begin with a mystery from the time when philosophers were poets and answered questions with riddles. This is from Empedocles, from something BCE, Greek philosopher. We're exploring the question today of the one and the many, how we explain reality at all sorts of levels. Let's start with Empedocles. Twice I shall tell, for then it grows to be one alone instead of more. Then again it disperses to be more instead of one. Twofold is the birth of mortals, and twofold their demise. For while the running together of all things begets and destroys one, yet another is first nurtured and then gone as they again grow apart. And these taking turns forever never find remission. At one time coming together in friendliness, all things into one. At another again, each carried apart in the hatred of strife. Thus, in the one respect in which one has learnt to grow out of more, and again, the one disintegrating, more multiply out. In this respect they emerge, and their age is not unending, but in the other respect, in which they never cease from endless interchanging, in this respect they always exist motionless on a circle. But come, listen to these tales, for learning will expand your faculties. For as I also said before in declaring the outline of my tales, twice I shall tell. For then it grows to be one alone instead of more. Then again it disperses to be more instead of one. Fire and water and earth and the measureless height of air. And deadly strife apart from those, as great in every way. And friendliness among them equal in length and breadth. The problem that Empedocles is exploring here is that there seems to be to reality this kind of weird dynamic tension between oneness and manyness. Nature is governed for Empedocles by unifying love, forces of attraction, unity and desire, and also dividing, diversifying, strife, decay, decomposition, and fragmentation. And they go back and forth in an endless cycle. And the ancient Greeks were fascinated with trying to get to the archai, the foundational principles, the grand theory of everything, the grand founding principles of reality. The central question they were asking, I think, was, is reality one? And if so, why and how does it do many things? This is the problem of the one and the many, which we're going to explore at different levels. The history of humanity, not just philosophy, is governed by this seemingly abstract question in science, in relationships, in politics, in psychology, and in religion. Let's take each one at a time. So in science, we seem to want a grand, single, unified theory to explain all the parts of nature. But some people stress the big unifying theories, and others focus on the kind of atomic bits and bobs. Some think the parts are explained by the whole, and others focus on the idea that the whole somehow explains the parts. Some stress the one, some stress the many, the one and the many. What about relationships? Well, some people focus on being a couple, togetherness. Others may want this unity, this oneness, but stress about their differences, the manyness between them, their freedom being curtailed. So you have an attraction towards togetherness, the oneness, and you have this kind of repelling force of wanting to keep apart and keep my distinctions and my difference, kind of what Empedocles was talking about a little bit earlier on. A desire for unity, but not at the cost of difference and freedom. These two forces, love and unification on the one hand, strife on the other hand, a struggle for autonomy, lie at the heart of most relationship difficulties. What about politics? Especially in our time, well, we long for true global peace and human unity, and we also prize national cultural differences and freedoms, the two forces yet again. And we see that played out amongst those who want to smooth society out into a harmonious, egalitarian unity, versus those who wish to stress the manyness, difference, and individual liberties. And we see these same drivers, I think, conflicting among people within the same end of the political spectrum, left or right. Do we stress social norms, our kind of oneness, or do we stress individual identities and rights? We or me? And I think those tensions are not just on one end of the spectrum. I think they cross over left and right, maybe centre too. So our struggle to hold these forces in tension leads to our current confused polarizations. So this isn't just abstract stuff. This question of the one and the many, or oneness and multiplicity, like, is at the heart of reality, and it works its way through like a word through a stick of rock, through every layer of our experience. Think about psychology. Like, we experience ourselves as a unity, a single being, and yet we also know ourselves to be comprised of many different conflicting drives, values, desires, parts of ourselves. And mental health is deeply about trying to integrate these different desires and drives and values, finding wholeness, integration of these internal forces without becoming a mere kind of robot that is kind of one but just static and not able to draw on all these different parts of ourselves. What about philosophy and religion? Well, these are there are worldviews that see reality as a single thing, and those that don't. And then there are those that reject the binary. More on that to come. A major issue, maybe the central issue in all aspects of life, is what stress we place on unity over plurality, or vice versa. Back to the Greeks and then the Indians in a moment. These issues are far from new, as we saw earlier on with Empedocles. The followers of Plato and Aristotle wrestled with these questions. Is the world fundamentally unified from above by a unifying principle, Plato, or is the world unified from the bottom up, from the many, many parts? What is a good civilization? Is it one where the state is drawn up based on top-down ordering principle, like an ordering principle, or is it one where the principles are derived from what works separately in different states? Is it one governing over the many, or the many different experiences kind of pulled together to see which ones work? So there we've got Plato and Aristotle again. Religion. Should religion stress the ultimate source? So those religions that talk about the kind of some sort of divine origin of everything, should they stress the ultimate source of reality, or should they admit to a multiplicity of gods and powers and ideals? Should religious life be about seeking to transcend the apparently distracting multiplicity of the world and find a kind of oneness in which to locate meaning and purpose and bliss? Or should it value the many varied things in the world? What kind of religion you get with those different takes will alter greatly. One's kind of parting more from the world, one's more kind of involved with the world. And if we're to value the many varied things in the world, how do we do that without losing focus? Why, another question we might ask is, why would an ultimate source, divine source perhaps, of everything want or desire to produce a world with many things, with many limited goods, if you like to use a philosophical term, and yet with that the kind of concomitant strife and evils that then exist, rather than not producing a world at all? Why not just settle with the one itself, if you like, then give rise to a kind of multiplicity? And these big religious questions are not merely religious. As we've seen, how we see reality, the world, ourselves, and our being in the world will alter our politics, our relationships, our psychology. What matters most in kind of unity or plurality, one or many? And I think in a sense our politics, relationships, psychology all intersect with a deeper, what I would say is as a religious question. It's certainly a philosophical question, but I think perhaps as a religious question. And it's interesting that, during most of human history, philosophy has been deeply religious. You would be hard pressed to go back to the ancient Indians, Hindu culture, or the Indus Valley, or the ancient Greeks. You'd be hard pressed to separate out philosophy or schools of philosophy from schools of religion. They were just one thing. So let's think about the Indian philosophers. Nowhere, I think, in human history has had such a profound culture of thought than India and the Indian kingdoms. Philosophers in the Indian kingdoms were probably doing philosophy long before the Greeks, and indeed, I think many of the Greeks were learning philosophy from these philosophers in the Indus Valley during the reign of Alexander the Great, and they were asking these big questions about reality. Two towering figures stand out over Hinduism: Shankara and Ramanuja. I'm going to bring another character in a minute. It's not quite so prolific. Now, Shankara emphasized the one. Okay, so Shankara taught something called monism, the belief that everything is ultimately just one reality. There's no real two-ness to things. So Shankara believed that there's no difference between the world and Brahman, or God, or the divine source, if you like, and that the reason that we are unhappy often is that we seek our life in the world, as if the world were a kind of separate, fundamentally real thing, when the only reality for Shankara is Brahman, the source. The world for Shankara is real, but its true reality is nothing but Brahman. Using the metaphor of a man fearing a coiled snake only to discover it was actually a coiled rope, so we cause our own imprisonment in suffering by identifying the world according to appearances, and we mistake the world, and therefore we kind of cause ourselves untold suffering. We imagine that we're separate beings from Brahman, and liberation is found, Shankara believes, in being freed from this ignorance or avidya and waking up to reality, that all is one, all is Brahman, and we are that. In I don't know which language it is, Sanskrit or Pali, I'm not sure. The words are tat tavam asi, basically meaning that you are that, or that you are. So we are Brahman, we are it. There's only one reality. This is known often in the West as non-duality. The Hindu word is advaita, meaning not two. Oneness, not plurality. So there you have Shankara stresses one and kind of downplays to the point of erasure the many. Down the line comes Ramanuja, who contested the non-dual approach and got into all sorts of fights with his teachers. Well, he didn't quite deny the non-dual approach, not completely. Ramanuja said, yes, okay, everything is ultimately Brahman, but that doesn't mean the world and individuals are not real. They are real and distinct from Brahman, such that an individual still needs to bother devoting themselves and seeking Brahman in the religious life, in prayer and devotion and so forth. There's a gap, a distinction for Ramanuja between you and God, even while you are ultimately Brahman. So his view is different from Shankara's monism, and also from the dualistic theism that was to be found in parts of Hinduism. So a teacher like, I'm going to pronounce this incorrectly probably, Madhvacharya, who thought that there is, yes, God, and there's, yes, human souls, and there's matter. There's kind of, he's emphasizing manyness, the separateness, if you like. But Ramanuja, I think, is interesting because his view holds together the one and the many, whereas Shankara brushes out the many, and Madhvacharya kind of then diminishes the unity, uncoupling the source from the world, the produce of the source, if you like. So, you don't need to be religious, but I wonder, were these ideas to be at all true, what model do you think would work best? It makes more sense, is more consistent. Shankara, everything's ultimately just oneness. Ramanuja, well, there's oneness and manyness. They're somehow linked together. It's part of the same reality. You don't need to deny the one to have the other. Or Madhvacharya, it's quite, there's things that are really quite separate. There's God, there's humans, and there's matter. If you've got no religious belief, how does this one and many question play out for you in nature? Do you stress a unified cause or the multiple effects? Why does the cosmos have a multiplicity to it, many parts to it? Or is that an illusion? And it only appears to us that there's many elements and parts and things, while really it's just reducible to a quantum field or some other base. And if you think the universe does contain real multiple things, why does what reduces down to your basic cause, why does it do manyness? Why isn't that just the thing? Why are these many things going on? How do we have this sort of one reality and these many things going on? If you're saying that the many things are real, not just the way we label them or an illusion. So I think the question remains for you too, if you're a naturalist. Is the universe part of a multiverse? Many. Aren't the universes of a multiverse part of one overarching reality anyway? So if we say what's real, what's reality, and you say, well, there are multiverses, you're saying that is what reality is, but it's reality singular. You didn't say realities. And if we say there's more than one reality, then you're forced into still saying, well, that's the reality, that there are more than one realities. I think something about this question that the unity is somehow unavoidable. Okay, well, a similar story to Hinduism's can be found in the West as well. Staunch monotheism, the belief there's one God, can and has been stressed sometimes to the point that the multiplicity of the world can be seen as a distraction. And this goes all the way back, I think, to like Plato. Although Plato's thinking had successful polytheistic versions amongst the Greeks, it suited itself well to monotheism. Plato's one, with a capital O if you like, the overarching principle of being, also known as the good, capital G, generates a world by its overflow into intellect, in Greek nous. Think of it as intellect with a capital I, containing the forms and ideas which shape reality, and then the cosmos, and then us. So for the Platonists, you basically have this idea where you have the one, and then it kind of emanates out and flows into its intelligence, and that shape then into the cosmos, and ultimately round, think of a circle, into matter as the kind of end cause. And that doesn't have to be a chronological set of causes. This could be going on right now. Okay, so you have the one, the principle behind everything, the good, overflows, and it is in a not in a temporal time sense, but this is the origin, and it's basically producing everything, time, space, the world, everything, and matter is, for the Platonists, kind of at the bottom of that hierarchy. it's the far end of the overflow from the one, to the point where because it's the furthest from the one, it's almost kind of like not quite evil, but it's deprived of the good, the most deprived of the good. Now pause there and think, well, if we reverse that, for the Platonists, if you go in reverse order, that's where we should be heading back towards the good. So the idea is that you are trying to escape the world of matter through contemplation back towards the intellect, through contemplation of the one and the forms and the ideas that emanate from the one, which lead you and point you back towards the ultimate goodness of the one. That is the path of liberation for the Platonists. See, I'm telling you, philosophy has always been a kind of semi-religious school. So the desire of Platonists really was to escape the body. Interesting, then the development that comes next. Along come the Christians, and they love Platonism. It provides this great model of reality. The one is like, God, and it aligns nicely with monotheism in many respects. But then there's this minor problem, you see, because God in Christianity has this unhealthy habit of being interested in the world of multiplicity, of manyness, and history, and getting involved and mucky with bodies, kind of actually back into this mucky material, corporeal world, to the point where one of the central models in Christianity is the resurrection, that the escape, or if you like, the full salvation isn't an escape from the corporeal, it's to be raised up with a resurrected body. Whatever that means exactly, whether that's fully immaterial in the strict sense that we might understand it, or something different, is another question we can talk about another time. But you've got this kind of really interesting thing going on. Now, I don't intend to get into Christian teaching in much depth here, but as with Ramanuja in Hinduism, there's this interesting thing that happens. Christian philosophers adapt Platonism so that the one embraces the many. And they do this by insisting that the one contains the many. God is one, but three, the Christian doctrine of the Trinity. God's oneness is multiple in some mysterious way. Now, again, I don't want to get into that too far, but we might notice that the Trinity of the Christian Platonists draws out what the Greeks were already straining towards before Christianity. The idea that the source of all must in some way contain a basis for why there is a unified reality which always refracts into manyness, and why manyness always nevertheless seems to point to a fundamental unity. The Christian Platonists would argue this is an image or reflection of the very cause of all reality. The image perhaps best used in any metaphysics for grasping reality is that of the refraction of light through a prism. I like this metaphor anyway. The multiplicity of colours are in the white light. The one, the white light, is plural and yet one. We cannot understand really the white light without knowing the refraction. And so we also can't make sense of the refraction without positing the white light. That the oneness and the manyness, you need to look at both to understand what they are. And I'm just wondering, this is not trying to give you particular answers, it's just a reflection really, but I'm wondering with this model, whatever its limitations, and whether you take it in a Christian Trinitarian sense or you just think of it in a more general ancient Greek sense of the one and the many, this model, might it be a good way of conceptualizing good philosophy, good science, good psychology, good politics, and good relationships? Aren't they all about somehow holding together in conjunction differences in a unifying bond? The one does not need to erase the many, and the many doesn't need to deny the one. And at root, perhaps, reality is more akin to a chord made up of separate notes, but are not really separate because they're played together as a oneness, manyness in oneness. Perhaps reality is more akin to a chord than a single note or three strung out separate notes. Yet it's a chord in resonance with its multiplicity in oneness. Thanks for listening. I'd love to hear your comments about any of that, whatever your views. Please pop a comment in there. I try and interact with people that put comments on the channel. And also, please put a like in there because that helps us in terms of the old YouTube algorithms. And also, please share, because that's the only way other people are going to get the fun of all this kind of weird thinking that I do here. So please share it generously on your whatever platforms you use. So I know Twitter, Facebook, wherever. Thanks for listening. Take care. See you guys soon.